Thanks, Marco, and really nice to see you all here. And thanks for the introduction, so I don't need to do that much myself. This is roughly the agenda. So today I'm representing research, and I try to frame this presentation as research, and but the results are very preliminary, so don't take that seriously then. But I hope that this will open some discussion. And so I'll start first with the introduction and telling a little bit why I'm doing this research, why I'm presenting here. Then I explain the research problem, our research approach, and a little bit so what kind of scenarios for the markets we have been identifying. And finally I try to give some insights on how to move forward. About me, so Marco already introduced, I'm a postdoc in Aalto and I'm working in S Group. And what makes that important, so I have a little bit different business background. So I'm working in a big company, that's my main job, but I've been doing research from a little bit different business perspectives. Actually, I did my master's in business strategy, and I've been also involved in a few startups, so I know the sort of pain of PIMS, for example, from that perspective. I have a multidisciplinary research background, so not only business-related stuff, but also doing the actual service design, HCI, so I understand the human perspective affecting computing and so on. But then about the MyData, so I was one of the co-authors of some original MyData papers and a co-member of the organizing team, and also been facilitating the Finnish MyData Alliance. So sort of the concepts of MyData are familiar to me. We have also, but one of the core reasons why I'm presenting here today is that we have a project aim at doing this, so explaining the roadmap to personal data markets, and a little bit about that project. So we have a project called Personal Data Management Platforms. It is a collaboration between Aalto University, which is me, Marco, and Tuukka Lehtiniemi over there. And it's also University of Helsinki, our partners in University of Helsinki are Minna Rückenstein and Mika Pansar, you heard today in the keynote. And then we have also Research Institute of the Finnish economy involved called ETLA here in Finland. And then we have a multidisciplinary research, which is not that technical, but it's more about the economical value, regulation, evolution of the platforms to infrastructures, and what it means when data subjects become data citizens. And overall, the sort of what is the management of the individual organizational relationship. So this is very much the background and the reason why I'm really explaining this research to you today and framing it as a research paper. So research problem, to put it really simple, for years in the community, people are saying, so okay, very interesting, I think we need something like that, but what is actually the market model? What kind of market comes out from the MyData ideas? Not really going the details of the actual white paper stuff, but really what is the viable model for the markets? Human-centric personal data management. And this is really a huge problem which our traditional research methodologies don't really that easily tackle. So let's a little bit improvise how to answer this kind of research problem. But before going to the research approach, I would really just, I think that most of you know the research motivation, just to brief you and orient how do I think about it. So first of all, we have been hearing this quite often in different presentations throughout the conference, and many of you have probably been exposed to this earlier. We heard Jeff also referring to this, that the trust is broken, we need to sort of regain the trust in line. Ad blockers, the biggest boycott, very much what Daxos was talking about last year. There's the GAFAMs, we are afraid of them, how they change the geopolitical, digital geopolitics and so forth. Yeah, it's sort of consenting the way it's done at the moment, the biggest lie, sort of I agree, but it's really challenging. And we know that there are a lot of unethical, at least unclear marketing and data processing practice at the moment out there. So there is really a sort of one important background is that the current situation is not really adequate. The status quo is not nice. Then when we think about the landscape, so there is actually a lot of technical innovation and transition going. You might have seen in some of the earlier presentations an earlier version of this chart, which we are using sort of as a map to understand what kind of technical pieces we have here at the moment. And not going into details here, but this is my just outline for the technical landscape, the technical framework for MyData. And each sort of piece in this puzzle, I think there is a lot of innovation and transition going. But the importance of this picture also in this presentation is just to highlight that the technical landscape is actually very complex. And it's been implemented in sort of different layers which do not resonate that much at the moment yet. And also that the people who come sort of developing each of these blocks here, they often have some kind of business heritage or technological heritage, which they tend to bring in while they are approaching this market. So that makes these things a little bit complicated and a challenge to make a big, solid and coherent picture out of it. But then, like the Boston Consulting Group paper about the value of digital identity has been referred quite often, but that's just a figure, but I think that's in the sort of background of many thinking about it. Okay, the market potential, if we can capture it, it might be really, really huge. So of course it's really attractive to think about it. So what is that market if that's the potential? And then what I think is very important here is that this is not just any kind of market, but it's the market about humans. We are the products in some way or another. So it's really sensitive and something you cannot approach with the traditional market approach or sort of business development or economics approach. This is something really, really unique in that sense. So this is these four things. So this content to the status quo, significant structural senses in technical frameworks and landscape, major market potential, and human as the product in the market. Those are the four main motivations why to do this kind of research, why to understand what is the market landscape in the future. So it's very simple sort of research approach. So let's have that research question I just explained. Let's think about the evaluation criteria, what is needed for that kind of markets, what kind of things we need to consider, then identify different market scenarios, and then evaluate those scenarios. So, and like I said, traditional sort of economics research or also are not really effective to tackle this kind of research question, which is somebody could say in an academic context, even suicidal, that you don't really get papers and solid research done with this broad research question going to the future. But let's try an action research, constructive research approach. So make it happen, make it right. That's been very much instrumental on why we are hosting this kind of conferences and why we are reaching out. So evaluation criteria for market model. Somebody would say that in a simple way, so does the market model enable sustainable business for the actors? I think that in many, many ways that is a core criteria for markets to exist. That the middleman, the companies that they are gathering around that market, they all have a viable business around it. I think that is in some ways core criteria. But by far it's not enough. So there's a lot of voices around this community. You know, these are the things that we need to consider while we are developing the market. So scared about the monopolization, people don't care. We heard about Jeff pointing out that it's really people don't want consent. This is not really what they're supposed to be doing. It's again also Paul mentioned the problem of sort of managing those many consents and so forth. Why would companies do this? Like big companies like S Group, we should concentrate more on values while the markets have been developing. So there's a lot of really many different kind of voices that give a new perspective on trying to understand and sort of developing the constructive approach on developing dialogue within this kind of community on understanding the best possible approach towards the markets. But so I've tried to categorize these different voices and this is what I got out of it. Not comprehensive, but just my way of articulating evaluation criteria. So how we should evaluate and try to understand what kind of markets are forming and what should be considered. So there needs to be the business viability. Like mentioned, the core actors in the market needs to have a viable business model. Also, the market needs to be effective, so transaction cost needs to be very low. But like mentioned, it's two-sided market. Whatever happens, in some ways it's a two-sided market. Humans being active actors, and then there is the companies also in place. So we need to understand the balance between these two sides. There needs to be also the human viability. So there needs to be a real value for individuals. Individuals need to understand really what they are doing and why they are doing this. Like they don't want to do consents as such. They don't need to be. This needs to really help people's lives in a real way. So not just extra stress or new tasks. This is not what we want there. And really real control, not just pseudo control over the data. Then, in addition to human viability, I think that it's important to look at the societal viability, especially when we are talking about the GAFAMs, for example. So the competitive market is really an important thing for the society, and the current development in the digital landscape is not going towards sort of stable market conditions. We need to acknowledge also the power balance between the business sector and public sector, and this is not really trivial. There's actually a major change taking place on that side, and we heard about that yesterday, for example, if you participate in the city's keynote. Many talk about that this is so fundamental for digitalization, this is so fundamental for change that it needs to be looked in as an infrastructure, that it needs to be an infrastructure level approach, and also that this is something that drives the digitalization of the whole public sector. So we need to understand what it means for the democratization of the society in the future, and for example, how it can impress evidence-based policies. But in addition, there's a lot of theory and needs and sort of thoughts that need to be considered, but fundamentally it also needs to be realistic, so it needs to be somehow actionable. Technology needs to be stable and solid, simple enough, and there needs to be enough community that actually thinks that this kind of market approach makes sense and they want to do it. So, research questions, then evaluation criteria, there might be 4 different perspectives there, and now let's go to the market scenarios. So again, this is a draft, there might be some others, but this is how easy I see at the moment. So, and again, so how do we have been identifying these possible market scenarios? So research, actually how we've written it in this research project, this personal data management platforms, is that let's host MyData conferences. Let's reach out to different actors in this domain. Let's try to understand what they are doing and how. So we are actively collecting data throughout this conference, in the presentations, Q&As, lessons learned. So this is also research instrumentation. It's much more, of course, it's the community building, but that's one motivation, how we are doing and why we are doing this. So really sort of research, action research through hosting conferences, you could say. But yeah, so starting about those scenarios. We heard, for example, yesterday from DCME, Julian Ranger, really wanted to emphasize that the GAFAMs, we are afraid of them. There's people sort of really want this to become a force that opposes GAFAMs, so Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. But there are actually, they want to change also. They don't want to be evil as such, but there might be sort of reasons why they actually go also through change where they put allow more control for humans. And this needs to be acknowledged. Facebook has been very active in the Pi conference, and they have been collaborating with Controlshift, which is a significant player in UK in this domain. So they are trying to understand the privacy concern, try to understand how to approach this field in a new progressive way. But can they actually transform their existing business models, which are inherently problematic, I would say? And then we see the geopolitical tension clearly, that they're US-based industry giants and nothing happening in Europe. I would actually add also Salesforce to this list. I think that they might be actually very important player. But I've been trying to also create analogies so that what kind of market analogies these different market scenarios can be found from some other context. And we heard this morning from Mika that okay, the train networks in the 19th century US actually had a similar market structure, but it evolved. It wasn't static, so something happened. Regulation happened and so forth. I would say also that credit card networks, they are pretty much similarly structured as they are as the GAFAMs are. So they are competing platforms. They have technical interoperability quite a lot, but they don't actually share the business models at all. Then we have the public platform. So eStonia, what we heard Wednesday by the CIO of Estonia describing, that's very valid approach is for many many needs, especially the stepping stone for governance and public sector to start developing new kind of digital services and do the digital transformation. It's not really perhaps a foundation for two-sided markets, and it's sort of really hard to see how sustainable is an approach where the public sector is providing a platform and they think that the innovations can start developing on top of that. So how much actually companies want to invest on developing and using the sort of public utility as a stepping stone. It can happen, but we haven't really seen major advances in the X-Road business community, even though in many ways for creating public sector services, the X-Road is a very good example. Again, there's a market analogy there. It's for example, in Finland, the state monopoly in railroad network is very much like that, and it's the stable thing. Most people in Finland are quite happy about it, but actually there's a regulation change perhaps coming to this also. But again, sort of in comparison with the GAFAM, so what happened in the US in the 19th century with train networks, so in Finland we never had that, but we have had always the state monopoly basically. Then we have the PIMS approach. So I called this an indie PIMS approach. So the independent PIMS try to somehow start making the market, and this is really sort of in a market way. I think that Jeff already pointed some good points there. That there are some challenges with the PIMS. Is the interoperability between PIMS is really a requirement. When they have a unique business model, it doesn't make a really coherent market. And also, what is problematic perhaps with the PIMS is that okay, when they are two-sided markets, but their business is very much relying on the B side than the C side. Even though they are saying that they are trustworthy third party and so forth, but if the businesses are relying on the B side, in the long term, what happens there? Does that just evolve into the same situation that with the GAFAMs if that happens? And also that there are startups who are playing in that field, so do they actually have enough investment capacity to make it happen? Then the fourth market approach is, there are a little bit different names for this, but I would call them identity networks. And here to really point out also, I think Jeff had a really important point about that the identity is the core. So identity networks, we heard Sovereign here, we have heard IOTA Foundation. In my mind, there is a lot of sort of similarities between how the cellular telephony networks have been forming. So this actually identity network approach has the inherent quality of interoperability and sort of making a common playground for the markets and also more democratic access for both sides of the market. But we don't really know actually what is the business there. So we have heard some hypotheses, but we don't have really valid cases yet. We have heard about premium claims, perhaps charging about the relationships. Charging data might be actually very complicated or impossible in this approach. Important here is that the functional layers, the business governance and technology, they are somehow integrated, but really together it's a very complex technological, legal, social, societal setup. And there are a lot of experts on this domain here in this conference, for example, but still we don't know that much on how it's working, and we are not able to talk these scenarios very efficiently yet. So I think that this might be a very good approach, but we need to learn and make it really much more understandable and solid before we can even analyze it properly. Then we heard from Paul a very interesting approach to this whole picture. So instead of looking at it about the identities and people to organization relationship and data flows, how about thinking through the sort of analytics and aggregation of data and delivering value through there. So we have actually heard a couple of cases like that earlier. There's some co-ops like the MyData. Biobanks actually have been thinking about how do they digitalize and make a digital transformation. The biobank transition has similar ideas, and there are a lot of technical approach how to make it happen, how to make the privacy-aware analytics machine feasible. And then as a sixth scenario, I have this what I call do-it-yourself benchmark data management, and there are these approaches where you don't really even consider the middleman necessarily. You just empower individuals with their technologies and devices, and this way make it possible so that they take the data for themselves and then just start processing it and offering it to companies. This probably is unrealistic. It's really hacker spirit and it's demanding for individuals. But then again, I tried to find a market analogy here, and then private cars is not far. Like I took the picture about those days. Or perhaps at that time there was already a lot of road infrastructure. But originally you can have private cars without that much infrastructure even. It's a very do-it-yourself, buy it from the right place type of thing, and sort of less infrastructure, less about sort of some middleman operating the whole core value production. So perhaps in an ideal world, if there would be a really sort of clear value production for individuals, something like this could happen. But perhaps the importance of this scenario is more about hacking and giving sort of developers experience on how can we do these things and how can we create new service concepts. So okay, now moving forward to the research outline. So 6 identified market scenarios. So how do we move forward? How do we evaluate these scenarios? How about doing a grid like this and start evaluating from a business perspective how viable each of these is, or how viable is it from the human perspective and so on. I think that this kind of thinking needs to happen, but it's impossible ultimately. I don't know. I don't think that quantifying this kind of evaluation ever makes sense. So let's do an experiment. Instead of evaluating this based on this kind of analytical approach, take out your machines and go online. So let's use intuition. Let's try to synthesize these different perspectives and answer to the question. So I have a poll for you online now. So based on your intuition, which market model would you prefer? You can choose many. So if it's too tough for you, then you can choose multiple things that you prefer. So what do we see here? Actually not that trivial. So there's votes for everybody, every scenario, and we see quite balance here on top, which I thought that could happen, but just makes it quite complicated to sort of move forward. So here you have GAFAM's public platform, IndieBIM's approach, and identity network all gaining more than 10 votes, and keep on voting. But actually a response that I thought we should have. But now let's do it again. So instead of voting like your favorite, try to rank them. So same question, but now based on your intuition, rank the importance of each market model. So let's see, do we get a different result like this? So I need to put the rating on.
Excuse me, what do you mean?
5 is best.
5 is best, yes. 5 is the most important, and 1 is not that important. Yeah. And can we zoom in? Is Tuomo there? Try to do it by myself instead. Okay, but I think we can read here. So the winner is identity network, and then we have a quite tight situation with GAFAMs and public platform. Okay, interesting. And now we have TV turning crazy, but yes. So thanks for this. I think that actually echoes with what I was trying to hear say. So this is my intuition at the moment. So GAFAMS is definitely a scenario we need to watch and explore and actively involve with. The public platform is probably not viable in the long run, but it's definitely important for now creating sort of momentum in this domain, and I'm very happy to hear what Suomi.fi is proposing, what the X-Road is developing. So this is very important at this place. India approach is still pending with significant industrial alliance and more interoperability, so definitely echo with Jeff. What his point was about identity networks in many ways might be an ideal solution, but still very complex and sensitive also to the balance between network governance and societal power structures. Analytics machine, not necessarily the core market mechanism, but might complement practically any of these scenarios. And like mentioned, the do-it-yourself data management, it's a little bit anarchistic perhaps for business as this big as the personal data management might be. And really unclear who is the middleman. But anyways, it's important to also understand the combinations and interplay of different models. So they probably don't happen. One doesn't necessarily win, or that might be actually preferable that one doesn't win. And they kind of make interesting combinations also. So what to do next? How do we proceed with the research? So we keep on iterating, we keep on collecting new cases and try to concretize those different scenarios we have been identifying so far. We need to also try to be constructive and active, so that's why we have been, for example, initiating collaboration with the sovereign here in Finland, and our spin-out project from personal data management platforms is called TrustNet, and I think that the launch event for this project is just about to happen. We need to also acknowledge those layers of development that Joki spoke Wednesday morning. And while doing this case collection, we try to be as transparent as possible and inclusive as possible. So join us, connect us, talk with us, and acknowledge that these different scenarios that they are developing in parallel. And as the last slide, I had this kind of sort of framework thinking for myself at least, and I don't know how much do you echo with this, but this is really a sort of systems design thing. If you want to take a constructive approach here, we need to sort of understand where are we going, what do we want to do here. And Wednesday morning it was really nice to hear from the Estonian CIO to talk about how important for X-Road has been the resonance between the technical framework and business framework. The technical framework and legal framework. But in order to develop that market, we need to also find those resonances with the business framework, which might be a little bit missing at the moment. So, and now the point here with the simplicity, resonance and values is not to sort of highlight these vertices of the triangle, but also to bring the sort of motivation to the design process. So we need to aim for simplicity, which is much about understanding the core concepts and reformulating those concepts. We need to understand also the human values here, because the humans are the product of this market, and really in the design process, in the iterative design process, try to find the resonances between these different frameworks. Okay, but that was my sort of overview about the market's sort of categorization. Thank you.